Welcome to another episode of TikTok Famous Podcast. Today on the podcast, I have Matt, otherwise known as Mute the Media, where we are going to be talking about all things deconstruction and capitalism and the left and the right and finding the center and what we can do to change it and stop it and make the world a better place. So stay with me.
You're listening to the TikTok Famous Podcast, where viral fame meets raw reality. Join your host, Meredith Willits, as she dives deep with your favorite creators to uncover the real stories behind the scroll, the highs, the lows, the algorithm chaos, and everything in between. This is not your average interview. This is the TikTok Famous Podcast.
Hello. I can't believe I have you on my podcast because I have been watching you for years. I've been listening to you for years. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you having me. So it'll be fun.
So you're one of my mutuals. I think you follow me back, or at least now you do. Where this is how I'll describe you, and you tell me when I'm wrong, please. I'm sure you're going to correct me because that's what you do, and I love you for it. I would say that you're in the center. You talk shit about the right. You talk shit about the left. You talk shit about all the things, and you just bring it to truth very courageously. Is that a summation?
I'd say that that's the perception from a lot of people, but I tell people I'm actually what you would call the radical left. And so a lot of it comes from kind of breaking down what I think is the American window of kind of where our political landscape is. But I do think the rest of that's pretty fair. I do try to call it as I see it. I try not to be, rigidly attached to anything and just kind of approach the moment based on the context. So.
And can we get some background? Because my question is always why. Why are you like this? Why do you post about this stuff? I know you've gotten into some kerfluffles, even with the lead singer of Tool?
No, I would never argue with Tool. It was Trapped. Yeah, with the lead singer of Trapped.
Okay, the lead singer of Trapped, which we will get back to. I have to correct my notes. That came from memory of remembering your little kerfluffle with them. Where does this all come from? Where were you born? Roughly, where do you live? And where is this passion coming from to make this kind of content, or to believe these things, or see the world this way?
That's a great question, and I kind of ask it myself. But really, the first thought goes to my dad. So I was born in California, West Coast guy, but my dad was born in Iran. And so his experience beneath the regime over there, so first it was the Shah, and then there was the Islamic Revolution, and then the regime over there. So his experience kind of, fighting for human rights, democracy, and these things beneath two different governments over there, and then, having to migrate here under not good circumstances has really kind of planted the seeds early on and really kind of probably laid the foundation for why I'm doing what I'm doing these days. So just kind of seeing his fight across his life, and working with him as I've gotten older. And then just seeing how so many of the things that he faced beneath Iran are happening here in some ways that I think that we're not aware of at times. So a big thing for me is human rights. It's always been kind of human rights, and I'd say that's kind of a quick answer where I'd go. It's just a lot of my experience, my dad.
Did your dad share with you a lot of like what he saw and why he obviously came here? And like how, like, was these from birth, from age 3? Was it age appropriate, or was this? I mean, we're all indoctrinated. We're all programmed. Your programming is just very different than my programming. We're all programmed. And so like, what did that look like? Because I know for myself, just to kind of sidebar it and not make it like, oh, this person and his parents were from Iran and he's been programmed to do this. We are all programming our children at the dinner table with the things that we watch, with the things that we purchase. I have long conversations with my kids. I call it racism all the time in my household. I'm like, that's racist. That's racist. Their mom, all you say is everything's racist. I'm like, because it is. And so these are ways that we do program our children, good and bad. So how does someone, well, I guess it would be human rights, and you're saying you're from the far left. So you go way deep that all people, no matter what, should have human rights. Because your dad probably expressed to you what that doesn't look like, or what that looks like when that doesn't happen.
Well, even that's kind of interesting, man. So, because my dad will describe himself as some form of socialism, right? Depends on the day and the conversation. And so, from a pretty young age, I kind of remember I was more interested in the conversations the adults were having than my peers sometimes. And so they'd be having, gatherings talking about politics, the Middle East, the USA. But what's interesting was I actually, when I was a younger person, I would have considered myself a secular conservative, actually, because of the influence of my mom's side of the family, Hills of West Virginia, down south, some good old rednecks, good people, but maybe not the most educated on more worldly things. So there was a kind of a tug of war in terms of where my mind went as a kid. You have the perspective of my dad, the perspective of my mom, and given both their backgrounds, they both tried really hard not to kind of funnel my sister into a certain direction. And of course, to your point, no matter how hard you try, we're always leaving lessons and planting seeds and impacting our thought processes, I should say. But that's been a journey because my mom's side of the family is very conservative. So at one point in my life, I was a young person listening to people like Sean Hannity and Michael Savage, and I was like, oh, these guys are interesting, right? And my parents were like, you know what, you're gonna have to learn for yourself, and they would kind of try to guide it. But my dad now, we joke about it. He goes, you weren't ready. And so I would hear things, and there was influence, and he would plant seeds. But it wasn't until I got a little bit older and really started to kind of break out of that conservative mindset that my dad and I started having more heavy conversations. Because going back to when I was young, I'd be around protests and things like that, and both parties were not very receptive to the cries of the Iranian people, as I understood it and as I saw it.
The what
So
people?
the Iranian people, good question.
Okay.
So the people of Iran, yeah, yeah. And so it was kind of interesting because I went from a secular conservative to kind of a centrist type to a leftist type to now kind of developing my own post-Marxist theory, and it's been a journey, right? So it's kind of tough to even explain at times because post 9/11 was really impactful, being half Middle Eastern and kind of the environment. I didn't really feel like I wanted to be in touch with my Persian side. I really wanted to identify more with my American side. So I was kind of ashamed of the little bit of Farsi I could speak. I was ashamed of like my dad's accent at times and comments people would make. And it was, it creates this climate where you don't want to identify with it because the terrorist jokes and things like that. And so I think that's part of why I am so bold now, is because there was a part of me that didn't feel like I could speak about these things or be true to who I really was growing up. And you don't fully realize it when you're a kid or a young person. But as I've gotten older, I've realized how much I felt disconnected from that really is who I am. And I'm trying to kind of be, more bold and courageous, like we were talking about. So,
It's interesting that because when I talk about some of the things on here, like I was raised Episcopalian. I did a stint as a Baptist, fundamental Baptist, with a guy I was dating, and then then moved on to just being spiritual, spiritual person, that doesn't have an affiliation to any one denomination or whatever. And I think that it's beautiful. And I think that it's so well rounded and gives so much more perspective to who you are as a speaker and a thought leader, that you did do those things. You were not indoctrinated from birth from both parents. You were just shoving this one message down your throat. Like you kind of walked that walk, and at the end of the day found what was right for you. Um my last guest from my other podcast was just on, and I talk about it. It's, you have to touch the stove. Anybody that's on my podcast, they are stove touchers. They get burnt, they touch the stove, they have to know. But the beauty in that is that you're not speaking out of your ass. You're like, no, I've done that. I've studied that. I know what that feels like. I know that type of what conservative means, you know. And so what do you think it was that took you from what I look at when I see conservative, far right? Anger is easy. It's easy. That's easy. To be mad and blame and shame and judge and point fingers at, and it's their fault that anything in my life is wrong. To me, that's real simple versus, no, what's my part? And what took you at a young age to leave the simplicity of that movement that is easy to fall into and basically internalize it? Because that to me is what had to happen for you to go, wait, it's not all the brown people's fault. Hold on a second. Wait, this can't be real. And then shift over to this liberal space where it's not that at all. How did you do that?
That's tough because like everyone's like, is there like a magic moment like where the light bulb goes off or something like that? But there's like an accumulation of things. I think the climate when Obama was making his run, because I was at that time I was a young person and I didn't vote for Obama in my first election. But hearing the rhetoric of people, and it wasn't about policy or things they didn't like, it was about his race or about his name or about how he wasn't from the country. And I was like, this isn't it, right? You start to be like, this is not it. And there's two big moments for me. In high school, so I was in California at the time, and I think it was Prop 8, for gay marriage at the time, right? If it's going to pass in the state. And I remember I had a friend who came out to me, and he was honest. He said, "Hey, I was afraid to come out to you because of some of your comments in the past, and I wasn't sure how you would respond." And I'm not trying to make it about me because that was his moment, but it kind of broke my heart a little bit because I realized I'm not a safe person for him if he felt that way. And it really
Right.
made me reconsider how I'm talking about things and how I'm approaching people. Because you don't want to be that person. You don't want to make people feel like they can't be who they are, especially, right? We talked about how I kind of felt post 9/11. I'm like, I'm doing the same thing to people, you know?
Yeah.
And so when you have that light bulb moment that the things you don't like, you contribute to, you just got to kind of be exposed to it. Another one that really helped was going to American River College and just getting more exposed to people, man. More people, their stories, their perspective, their travels, and breaking out of the bubble, and just realizing if you really want to be this facts over feelings person, which even that is kind of a silly thing now, right? But that's what the conservative mantra kind of is at times. And I realized, well, there's a lot of facts that are cutting against my strong feelings. And so I had to reevaluate a lot of things. And then once you begin that reevaluation and you're open to it, game's over. You're going to always be on that path of deconstruction, education, playing with your own ideas and things like that. So I'd say the climate around Obama and then some of my own experiences with friends and realizing how I was on the wrong side of those things were kind of some big eye openers that got me to kind of shift from that more conservative perspective to where we are now.
And what I'm seeing too is like there's a couple of things that I'm as you're talking, it's like you either become the beast or the or the non-beast, right? So like if you're abused, you either heal from that and move forward and become your own person, or so many people become the abuser, right? And I think in that moment where you had that connection with your friend, you said, "Holy shit, I'm the abuser." And like after post 9/11, I don't want to be the abuser, and there's so many people, I think, especially in my generation, Gen X, where we just said, I don't want to hit my kids. And that's kind of like that pivotal moment where you're like, I don't want to keep doing it this way. And it sounds like that's kind of that moment for you. But that moment for you came because of hearing someone's story. And I think that in this day and age, it's so easy to be a keyboard warrior or to other people, no matter who the other is, LGBTQ plus, women, black, brown, indigenous people, homeless, poor. It's easy to other them because we don't touch them. We don't drive in those neighborhoods. We don't have interactions with them at our parties. And so it's easy to other somebody and keep them over there. And then they become a caricature of humanity that we can then do whatever we want to them. We can, deport them after they've given birth. We can have laws against them, whatever it is. And I know for where I sit, I'm a big traveler for my family. I think it's huge. I've been to many countries, learned. I actually made a video about I'd rather send my kid to travel the world than even to go to college, because you cannot learn in school what you can learn by way of traveling. And the United States has done an excellent job of making Americans afraid of everything. I have a lot of family members that will not leave the country, have no desire to ever leave the country. Everywhere they go, they're afraid they're going to be killed. And so the United States is a nice, safe place. And I know what this is and everything like that. But when you do travel and hang out with the others, either at a party or in their country, and learn that these are people with feelings and beautiful cultures and language and religion and food and dance and all of the things, it's so much harder to other them
Yeah, you
because
have
it
to
becomes,
humanize
yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
You
it
know?
becomes we. And, America does a great job. I mean, right now, if you talk to probably 20 people and divided it down the middle, and it's even probably seeping into the left, most people at this point would be afraid to travel to Europe or Mexico, et cetera, because we're going to be beheaded by the cartel and, we're going to all die and so on and so forth. Shit, they talk about Chicago that way, I'm going to die. Don't go downtown. I'm like, I live here. I'm standing here. I'm in front of a fountain. Everyone's riding their bike. It's good, right? But our country does a really great job of we're the greatest country in the world, and it's the only place that you're going to stay safe. And it's working.
It's incredibly powerful propaganda. It's incredibly powerful. And I think the sad thing is about some of these examples you list, they're creations of our own. We create these things with our foreign policy or our domestic policy, and then we point the finger at people and we absolve ourselves of it. Like you said, it's that American exceptionalism. I think it all can kind of come back down to that word. Not all, but most of it can kind of come back down to that word, the American exceptionalism. And what is an American, right? And they try really hard to create this image of the good American, right? And we kind of know what they're pushing. Pale skin, Christianity, male. Yep. And if you're not that, you're the other. And to various degrees, right? Various groups get kind of a different tones of what that looks like in terms of othering and violence and things of that nature. Also, I'm jealous. I've always wanted to go to Chicago. So
You're welcome anytime. I'm actually sitting in the spare bedroom. You're more than welcome to come visit. I'd love to have you. I'd love to have you. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you think about it, when we other people, then we can create policy against them. They've created an entire campaign. We've created an entire campaign because we are them at this point. That's one thing that we need to realize is as long as it's still happening, we are them because we can't other the Republican Party. We can't other the liberals. We can't other we're them. We're doing this. We're taking part in capitalism. I haven't shopped at Target. I haven't shopped at Walmart. I'm doing, my darndest here. We're going to talk about boycotts. Um, but it doesn't matter. We're still them. And so we need to recognize that as long as we're a part of this system, unless, and I love learning on social media, unless you're anti, you are a part of. It's not just, you can't just be non-racist, you have to be anti-racist. You have to call it out when it happens. You have to, these things. So that all being said, that we are the system, we're not getting rid of the system anytime soon. And we know what the goal is to make America the 1950s again with redlining and all these other wonderful things. What's the answer? Because I am taking, I have in my calendar, my whole family's on, do not buy from Target. And, you said boycott lists are silly on one of your videos. We need to be more focused. So what is your answer? I'm trying to keep up with the social media. I'm trying to do my part, spend my dollars where it makes sense to spend my dollars. What is an answer for capitalism and what is the alternative? Because people think if we don't have capitalism, we'll all be lazy and it's not fair for doctors to make $50,000 a year and, teachers to make $50,000 a year. And like, it's capitalism or what? Socialism, they say is, is communism. Like speak on I know I just threw tons of shit at
you're
you,
fine.
but yeah.
No, it's what is the answer? I think that's what we're all kind of looking for right now. And I think that anybody who claims to have the answer is probably disingenuous. Because my first mind goes to, it depends on the perspective, right? Even amongst, we'll call it my crowd, people who would consider themselves anti-capitalist, that can take so many different forms and so many different strategies, right? If you are someone who considers himself a progressive or more of a liberal, I know I can be pretty harsh, but I think that many of the people that I have friends that are liberals consider themselves progressives, their perspective, what's the answer? So to me, it's probably understanding what electoralism is, right? Understanding what different anti-movements look like. Because even within anti-movements, you have pure abolishment movements, which are like, hey, you know what? These systems are inherently corrupt. We probably can't even reform them from within. So let's build power outside, right? So from that perspective, that could be, for example, you're going to talk about strikes. You're going to talk about boycotts, right? Literally not utilizing these things. You'd have probably people who would even say that voting is some level of being complicit, right? Where I kind of push back a little bit. You have different movements that think, hey, we got to work within and outside, right? So even on the what I would call kind of the more communist and anarchist socialist side of things, there's kind of debates over how to approach this. I think the biggest thing for me personally, if I was to answer this question, I think it starts with us, like you said, really recognizing what is my role within these things and understanding that simply I can call myself an anti-capitalist, but I'm still part of the system. There's still days where I benefit from the system and I'm embedded within the system, and you can't disconnect yourself from it 100%. In my opinion, there's probably people who try, who are really like homesteading and things, and really living a sustainable a life. But for me, it really just starts with education. I think that so many people are plugged into the system. They're proponents of the system. And even those who are kind of starting to feel like there's something wrong, they don't know where to go. Like, okay, like, because, all right, maybe capitalism is the problem, but we've been taught since day one in this country that socialism, like you're saying, and communism are bad. And I think that would help to maybe understand these things and start to kind of help people understand what is capitalism necessarily. And that's something I've been trying to work on lately, is deconstructing the idea of capitalism a little bit more. Great people have done it in the past, probably better than I ever could, but maybe making it more updated and modern. But I think it's getting people to understand that there's different ways to analyze your society. There's the social, there's the political, right? There's the economic, and I think that we neglect the spiritual. I use the word philosophical because I think that people kind of get a little bit, religion, spirituality. There's a lot of trauma attached to some of these things. So I try to avoid some of those terms that get people kind of bogged down. I consider myself spiritual now. I used to be agnostic, atheist, but I think it's understanding these four pillars and noting and kind of understanding what the political mechanisms are and the economic mechanism, which is capitalism. And I think it's helping people understand that economics is not a complex thing. We make it complex: GDP, Wall Street, markets, numbers, supply, demand, all these things. But economics to me is as simple as, here are our resources, how do we access that, and how do we distribute it? And do you think that everyone deserves to be part of that or not? And capitalism to me is an inherently competitive economic model. It prides itself on its competitive economic model, that it breeds this innovation. And I love competition in the right lanes, in the right context. I'm an athlete. I love competition, but I don't think we should be competing for resources. I don't think you or I deserve water more than, someone in Flint, Michigan, or, someone in a different country. I don't think we, so to me, it's food, water, shelter. Understand that these things are the economy. We've commodified them. We've turned them into for-profit endeavors. That's probably why our infrastructure and so many of our lives look the way they do. Because if you don't have the capital to access these things, that's a slow march or even a quick march to your end. These are basic survival needs. So I think it's getting people to understand that as a country, we don't value human rights. We can talk the big talk, we can point to things like the Constitution, but there's nothing in this country that says, hey, these are given rights for everybody that everyone has access to, and therefore we go and try to pursue that. Even recently, there was a UN, I think it was a couple of years back, but a UN resolution just to, and this is symbolic, just to say that food is a human right. We voted against that as a country. We're one of the few, right? So we don't believe that. We don't believe in survival. We don't believe in these things. We believe in profit. And I think that's kind of always been, I would say, self-evident, right? If we talk about I'm kind of rambling on here. Feel free to cut me off at any point.
No, you're
But
perfect.
but I also feel like if you look at like the establishment of this country, right, we're this great democracy. Less than 10% of us had access to the vote. If you were a woman, you weren't voting. If you didn't have land, you weren't voting. Obviously, if you were black, you were in chains, you were being enslaved, you were being dehumanized, you weren't voting. You were considered property. And capitalism is all about the protection of private property. And so you have an economic system that will turn people into labor units or non-labor units. And that's an incredibly dehumanizing process in and of itself. And so for me, it's less about some specific system and more about your foundational values. And I think
Well,
go ahead, yeah, go.
aren't we looking at that in Florida when they're talking about bringing back child labor because they're losing migrants, they're losing illegal aliens, is what they call them. We're losing those workers, and so it's like, oh yeah, let's bring back child labor. And when we talk about we don't value those things, human rights and caring for people, that's self evident when we look at cutting USAID and not realizing that a lot of what USAID, although looks like food, although looks like medicine, although looks like vaccines, is actually an underlining safety net for peace. And they're missing that. They miss that piece that, like, when you talk to the workers at USAID, yes, we're giving food, but there's so much more wrapped into that food that we're sending that has a ripple effect across the world. And so, you know, I think when I'm listening to what you're saying is, as long as I have mine, I don't care. I think the problem is that you can have yours, people can have theirs, but if everyone doesn't have some, they miss it. There's no one to buy their product. There's no one to help build the house or deliver the mail or make the grocery store grocery or make the build because there's not humans. And so back to your point about then the lesser person does the work. You said that somewhere in there in a way or shape or form, which made me think of, and that is why we're, you know, they want to have a one voter household, which is the male. They want to have women losing rights to vote. They want to have children work. So we're kind of just moving the worker force away from the people they don't want in the country to then who's next, right? I mean, who's next with the top dog being the white male. And so I think that how we got to where we're at right now is the feast or famine mentality, which is, and they've talked about this. There's too many black and brown people in the country. Literally, I can feel it's making me physically sick, to be honest with you, talking about it this way. There's too many black and brown people in this country. They're going to steal our majority. And I know that because I talk to people that speak like this, and they're like, and I've had people message me years ago that said Muslims have 8 to 10 children. Us white people need to start having more babies because they're going to take over our country. And that's the fear around the speaking Spanish. That's the fear around other religions. It's on the freaking chalkboard, people. This is easy stuff. You can see the way it's happening. It is white fear, white male fear. And I think, and I've heard in your videos talking about when Obama became president, that was the beginning of the short circuiting. It was and they could blame it on acorns. I remember I never heard the word acorns so much in my life, when I don't even know what the hell acorns was, but I just remember it was a huge thing and like I should be afraid of it. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but I was younger and dumber, and way less finger on the pulse. But I remember watching, and it was like, if a black person can become president, we're screwed. That's it. Where this is the beginning of the end. And now we're seeing the pendulum swing all the way to the other side, which is we have to protect this at all costs. And this meaning non-Muslim, non-Hindu. It's not even Christian. It's just not that.
Mhm.
I'm so sick of hearing white Christian nationalism. It's not Christianity. These people are not followers of Christ. Just call it something else. I don't care what you call it, but stop with the word Christian. But that's what we use.
They
It's just
are
not the other
followers of
shit.
Christ. What if they are followers of Christ? And hear me out, because I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying, the sentiment of it. They're not followers of Yeshua, right? Even what they did to Yeshua, what they do, they took his name, they changed his skin color, they changed his views, and they weaponized it for their global domination. I do mean global domination, because this is really, I'm sorry to cut you off, but this to me is really interesting, because I kind of been
Yeah.
looking at, I've been asking this question, because like I said, I was agnostic atheist, and I find myself kind of more and more spiritual, like, so to me, I think Yeshua was a pretty simple guy. He lived beneath an empire. He was for his neighbors and for the the oppressed and for the unloved and for the undesired, right? And I think he pretty clearly stood for them. He was flipping tables, right? And then you have a Roman Empire that we know what happened to him. And what's really interesting is it's not the teachings of Jesus, in my opinion. And I'm not an expert on this stuff. There are people who are so far more versed when it comes to theology and history than me. This is kind of my, layman's understanding of things. But we look back at Constantine, a couple hundred years later, and this guy's like, I saw the vision of God in the sky before a battle. I was destined to win. I'm a divine ruler. And then you see the Roman Empire adopts Christianity as its religion. And even before that, the Roman Empire was already expansionary. It was already militaristic. It was going into new lands, trying to find new markets, right? Kind of precursors of, And what happens if they don't want you in these markets? They would kill them. They would take over, right? They would conquer. And then when you add the religious fervor to that, which is, to your point, it's not who he was. It's their interpretation. It's their hijackery of it. It's a really toxic mix. When you already think you have this right to go in and conquer, and now you think it's divinely inspired, I think you can see how those seeds are what we're dealing with right now. I don't think that mentality has changed. It might take different forms, but yeah, it's that white Christo-fascism, right? That thinks that it deserves to have more. They think that these things work out for them because they're religiously inspired, and these other religions or other people or other demographics are less than. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. They're not followers. They may be followers of Paul, maybe, but they're not followers of Jesus, as I think a lot of people would understand him and take away his lessons, like you were saying. I wholeheartedly agree. I just kind of wanted to penguin off on that because it's a really
No,
interesting topic to me.
well, I always talk about that religion is the right hand of the government, and it's really easy to say, hey, if you don't do this, if you do that, if you have an abortion, if all these things, um, publicly, by the way. Now, I mean, you could do it in private. You could cheat on your wife in private. You could be a homosexual in private. You could just don't tell anybody about it. But if you do these things, then you're not going to go to heaven. It's a very easy way to manipulate people who are living in fear. That it's hand to mouth, and when you tell them, well, if you were just a good Christian, you would have more. If you would tithe more, you'd have more. If you would if you do all the right things, and if you were anti-abortion, if you were anti, and you could see it. There's that photo of Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office, and they've got all of these people laying hands on him while he's sitting at the desk in the Oval Office with praying over him, which I'm all for. Like, hey, pray for me. Like, please, I'm here for that. But it was very different. It's when they're calling him the second coming, when they're calling him being sent by God. That is so manipulative to people who live, breathe, and die their faith. And that's a lot of times what a lot of people have. They have their faith. Look where the majority of the churches are. They're in impoverished areas. They're the community centers of people who are literally praying to God to make it to the next day. And when you have very smart, manipulative people using the right arm of the government of religion to manipulate these voters, which, if you just saw yesterday, the Episcopal Church has separated from the United States government after decades of being in some sort of communication or relationship with the government. And now you see, I made a video the other day of the Pope versus Trump with, I'm like, this is interesting. First United States born Pope ever. This is very telling. But when you have the Pope speaking out against our president, who's also, from the United States, I think we're starting to see, and I just had a guy on, we were talking about the difference between medical organizations versus the doctors themselves, right? And I think we're starting to see a difference between religious organizations and the human beings that serve those organizations, who went into servitude under the church because they wanted to make a difference. They wanted to feed the poor. They wanted to speak to people and widows and people that are in pain and bring them to the altar for Christ, or for, to save them, to really literally bring love into their lives. And I think we're starting to see the separation between the humans that serve the church in some ways, and the church itself, which again, I'm saying is the right hand of the government through manipulation. And yeah, I think that I feel, and I talked about this the other day. I don't even know who I was speaking to. Oh, I was on a podcast. I feel that we're at a crescendo. I think when we're seeing the Pope, when we're seeing the biggest coming out and saying, no, be woke. Woke is good, from the Pope, which I am not a Catholic follower at all. We're seeing something happening here. We're seeing something major happening that we have never seen ever before.
Yeah, and I think people would I know people who would push never before, but I agree, just because even if there's similarities in terms of the fractures, the conflicts, we've never lived in a time with this kind of technology, and a time where information flows, it's created, it's moved, it's stored this way. And so these are new times in the sense that the context is very different. Many of the ideas and the conflicts are the same, but the context and the environment does change it. So even the worst ideas move faster than ever, right? They get people in faster than ever. And then to your point about religion, I think this is interesting. I think the West likes to consider itself secular, right? Oh, we have a separation, but that's a name. That's not an action, to your point, right? And I think what religion does a really good job of, some of these institutions, because I do think we should separate between religious people themselves and the institutions, to your point, right? Because there can be people who follow a certain faith and they live that faith, right? You see it in their actions day to day. And I think their institutions are the ones that are hypocritical most often, and they're good. How do they get their following? Children, Sunday school, early, right? Like we were talking about at the very beginning, before you even have the tools in place to really critically think for yourself. In a lot of ways, they get you, right? And people who are struggling right beneath capitalism, beneath our government, beneath our policies, who is oftentimes, and it's this word mutual aid, direct action, churches are oftentimes the ones in the communities helping people.
Yep.
And that's human nature. If you're in an incredibly vulnerable state and someone helps you, yeah, I'm going to check out what they're talking about, because they're the ones helping me when all
Well,
these
look at
people are in.
Scientology. I mean, literally stand on the corners of Hollywood waiting for homeless teenagers and young adults to get off a bus, and they're like, "Hi, are you having a problem? Come here to this place and I'll help you." I mean, Scientology is like the 101 of getting people in, and then now you're trying to chase it. Now you're trying to get there. Now you're trying to seek salvation. I mean, and what did Elon Hubbard?
Yeah,
Elon
Pepper.
Hubbard,
Yeah,
right? Say
yeah.
is if you want to make $1 billion, start a church. I mean, it's the things that you and I are talking about. It's simple stuff. You can see it if you choose to see it. And I think that that's what you're so good at on social media is punching people in the face over and over and over again and challenging all of us, left, right, middle, undecided, whatever, and going, no, you're still not there. No, you're still not getting it. Because I think myself being a moderate, I probably am more like left. I'm probably closer to you, while still dipping my toe into the very, capitalistic life. Um, because I'm still trying, damn it. I'm still boycotting. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that, you know, we still we still need someone to challenge us. We still need to not get too comfortable and feel good about ourselves, if that makes sense. Like, I think that a lot of people in their politics, they feel good about what they're doing. And I think that, I made a videos a while ago saying, no, we need to hold all of their feet to the fire. If you're not holding your president's feet to the fire, Obama, Bush, Biden, Trump, we need to hold everyone's feet to the fire and question everything. And when you're not, you're in a cult. You are living inside of cult mentality. And that's what I think that you're doing such a great job of. If you're not blowing smoke up the left's ass and saying, well done.
I appreciate that, just because it's like I appreciate the kind words, because look, man, I know myself, my views have changed over the last 5 years. So I do try to kind of take it to people. But honestly, that's because in my own head, it's pretty rough in here, in terms of trying to be honest and reflect on yourself. I do think, look, man, if you're doing the work, I do think that there's times to take a step back and maybe give yourself a little pat on the shoulder, right? People do deserve a little grace. And like you said, like, I think the best of us still fall prey to these things, right? My background is I'm about to finish my degree in communications, and one of my areas of emphasis is mass media. I fall prey to mass media effects every day, and I'm a relative expert on that topic. Like, it's my area, and I make mistakes within media every single day.
In
And
what
so I
way?
think, sometimes I'll see someone post something, and I'll think, hey, I know this person, I trust them, so I'll share it with someone else. I didn't do my homework. I didn't go check the source myself, the link myself. And hey, I just was complicit in sharing what might have been originally disinformation. I just shared misinformation from my
Yeah.
perspective, right? And so I think, we got to be more receptive, right? Like you're kind of saying, to like how we play a role in these things. Because at the beginning, you said it, we are these systems. We are, like, I hear people say we need term limits. Maybe, but we are the term limits. Why don't we just show up and vote them out? That's your term limit right there. We are the economy. If we were all just not to go to work tomorrow, the billionaire class is going to have a hard time all of a sudden, right? So I think it's kind of recognizing that we are these systems, but I also think that is a product of, and it's kind of boring, but I think it traces back to capitalism and also our political mechanisms. Because I would argue that out of the Enlightenment, there was this idea of liberalism, right? Classical liberalism originally. And I would define that as, predicated on the idea of individual rights, individual liberty, right, private property. And that sounds good. Individual liberty, individual rights, that sounds really good, especially at a time where we are openly seeing Project 25, right? They're not hiding what they're doing. But I think the problem is that word individual. Because to me, if you have a political or a moral philosophy that is individualistic by nature, that would be anti-collective. And so I think that we create this very individualistic me society where we don't feel connected to people, we don't feel connected to systems, we don't feel connected to the solutions. And a lot of people are just trying to find ways to hide from it so they don't feel it, as opposed to trying to find ways to fix it and build something better, in my opinion. And again, that's me, man. Like, there's things every day I got to do. Like, I think you saw one of those videos where I'm terrible at fast food. And that's rooted in convenience. Why don't I buy better brands? Why don't I think about the source of where this food's coming from? Why don't I go to my local, grocery store, like a Winco or something, as opposed to even the bigger brands and the bigger stores that have a kind of zip code mentalities and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just being more open to how we play a role in it to begin with, and then finding ways to connect with people, just be human.
Huge.
So
I think that's the answer. I really do. I think the answer is things like this where we're, all kitty, where we're all hanging out together and having conversations. There's a part of me that would like to have some conservative people on the show, this or my other podcast. But at the same time, I'm not going to tolerate lies. I'm not going to tolerate misinformation. If it's not rooted in facts and science, then, I'm not going to have those folks on. So mute the media is your desire to what?
that's the question of the day. It changes every moment, man, because I just want to do so much because there is so much in front of us. If I was to strip it down to my main goal, it's media literacy, just helping people kind of navigate this climate. Because once upon a time, I think censorship was more obvious. It was just very strict. Hey, we're going to block this. You can't see this. And it was easier to do, right? In prior technological iterations and information climates, you could burn a book. You could lock the books up. People didn't have access to the same languages. You could write it however you wanted to translate however you want. A few people can speak it, and you're kind of beholden to the experts at the time. And not to critique expertise, because I think there is a lot of anti-intellectualism where we try, all opinions are equal. No, they're not. But nowadays, especially like in the USA, we have this illusion of freedom, I think, and not that there's not levels of freedom still, but instead of like strictly blocking information, they just throw the whole thing at us. And so now it's more of a question of what I call kind of like soft censorship. So now it's like, not only are we still dealing with old school forms of censorship, right? We see them trying to ban books and out of Utah and things like this, like Judy Blume, and it's like, come on, man, right?
I grew
Rupi
up on those.
Kaur. Yeah, my sister did. I was like, these look good. I read them too. They're good, man. Like Rupi Kaur, she's a great poet and stuff, right? Who I think she's a
Maya
great
Angelou.
writer. Yeah, yeah,
Maya
exactly. Yeah,
Angelou.
yeah, great
What?
writers who give different perspectives, right, from the non-white, perspective. But you also have now, so it's, people are kind of more privy to that, I think, right? It's easier to identify, even if we still struggle with it. So they throw it all at us, right? All this information. Good luck navigating it. And even if you can navigate it, which is probably the first step, right? The second step is, how do you not become desensitized, and how do you not normalize it when you see these things so much? It just becomes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
So
Aaron
that's a
Parnas comes up, and sometimes I'm like, I listen to the first few minutes, and I'm just like, okay, I already know that. Okay, one more crazy thing. Like it's not even desensitized, it's overwhelmed. It's I have to still be a mom today. I still have to have some sort of mental health moment, like, and a lot of it you're like, okay, I got to go for an hour walk because I am up to here with the buzz, the buzz, and it becomes a lot to eat and sleep and not be short circuited because we do only have so much bandwidth as humans to absorb information with a lot of times, which I think is beautiful for people like yourself and me, we do have a place to put that energy on our platforms, on our podcasts, in writing. We have a place to absorb and expel, absorb and expel. We just have to hit record or go live. A lot of people are just absorbing, absorbing, absorbing with absolutely nowhere to put it. Their kid walks up to them and says, "Look at my artwork, mom." And it's like, like because you only have so much. So two things, because I can't let you go without these questions. What do your mom and dad think of what you're doing? Not that it matters, but I want to know.
Oh, it's a good question. I think it's a fair question too, because I'm always telling people to confront these things in the moment. So what does that look like for me in my day to day, right? I love my mom to death, but she's sometimes not a fan of my views, and she's also worried, right? She was like, count 30 seconds before you do something. She's always worried because I'm pretty, let's go. My dad's pretty, we're pretty aligned. We have our disagreements on like policy sometimes or strategies, but I think my dad and I work together anyways. Through OYAC, he's been really involved, obviously, in human rights his entire life, not just in words, but in action. OYAC is the Organization of Iranian American Communities, so they just try to highlight human rights abuses and bring awareness to what's going on in Iran and how the U.S. can kind of play a role in that sometimes and how we can help from here. Um, so we do kind of talk a lot more about politics and kind of what the day to day looks like. But he gets worried too. They both worry about their hothead son. So
Yeah, with his
yeah,
wild hair that I love so much. It just lends to the chaos. Like, never cut that. You had it back, I think it was in one of the videos, and my heart stopped. I'm like, oh, no, don't do it. It's like it's like you stop the insanity, like keep the insanity. I love it. So you did get into a kerfluffle because you know, uh being on social media is not I never want to sound like, oh my god, we haven't so we don't. I'm not cleaning toilets. I'm not, picking up garbage behind a building. But it can be scary. It can be intimidating. It can be really hard on your mental health, reading comments, hate comments, death threats, day after day, over and over and over again about your opinion, um, views, facts, etc. And so how in the Sam Hell did you get into a fight? Was it the lead singer of Trapped? What
it
did
was
happen? He was didn't he ask you to go to his concert so he can like beat your ass or something?
it was so silly, man. It's not my proudest moment to be honest, but look, so communication is something I think is sacred. It's our first tool. And so I think that if you say something, it should mean something. And if you say something, there should be action behind it. That's integrity, in my opinion, right? The second our words don't connect to our actions, there's no integrity. And so my main account was like on suspension because MAGA had like mass reported me. And I was pissed. So I jumped onto my backup account and I just called them out. I was like, yo, MAGA, you guys are this, this, and this. And he commented, talk about how he'd want to get physical with me. And I was like, beautiful. I was like, name the place. I was like, name the place. I'll show up. We could do it for charity. Heck, we could do it old school. I don't care. And then he followed up again and made a video saying, you won't show up to a concert. You won't show up to a show. And it's like, bro, you're not doing concerts, first of all. Let's be honest. But second of all, so I was like, bet. So I instantly went and looked it up. And hey, he's going to be at a show 15 minutes away from me in a couple months.
Stop.
So I got a ticket. I was like, screw it. I got a ticket. I was like, and I made a video. I was like, I'm going to see you in 2 months in Roseville, pal. You said it. You asked for it. I'm going to see you. And then instantly his tune changed. Oh, I'll serve you up with lawyers and all these things. Like, I don't care. I'm going to see you anyways. And so I showed up. I meant it, man. I showed up. They wouldn't let me in the show. They had
Stop it.
security, or they wouldn't let me in. I got in. I had someone with me. It's documented. I got in to the entrance. I started to walk in. They go, whoa, 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 you got to stop him. They pulled me out. They were super nice. The venue was super cool about it. They didn't want to, obviously, they don't want to get involved. They had to just kind of do their job. Like, hey, we were told you can't be allowed in because of possible violence and stuff like this. And so then I went around back, and he had his trailer right out there by the takeout entrance, and they had security around that too. So I couldn't get near the guy.
That's fantastic. You're like a super villain versus Trapped. Oh my gosh. They were ready for you.
Apparently, he took me seriously as he should have. Look, man, I'm just an average dude. I'm not like there's guys who could whoop my butt out there, right? But I'm not afraid. If you want to do it, let's do it. I have a find out mentality, We got to touch that stove, like you were saying.
Gotta touch
So,
the stove.
but I think I'd approach that differently these days. Because to me, he's more of a pathetic figure. Kind of actually almost, he's got some gross views, but I kind of feel bad for the guy. Obviously, some deep insecurities and stuff, and I approach that a little differently these days now.
Yeah.
But it makes for a good story.
It does make for a good story. There are some people that are mutuals or people that I follow, and they might make a comment, and I'm like, I kind of message and be like, that person has an issue. Don't go there because you're dealing with someone with mental health issues or, some faculty issues. And they're like, oh shit, and they take it down. Like, because you never know who you are kind of going to war with sometimes. Have you ever been afraid inside of the face of courage? Because I know a lot of us are afraid, and it is scary sometimes to put your views out there. Have you ever, really had to censor yourself or been afraid of what people are posting or threats and so on and so forth, taken seriously?
Nothing in that sense. Mm, I'm an athlete. I'm a fairly big dude. Like I'm not like the biggest guy, but I feel comfortable in that sense. I've had my butt whooped before. I've won a few scraps, and so I'm not really afraid of the physical side of life. There's some privilege with that. The self-censorship kind of comes more from like people I value and care about, and just not wanting them to think like ill of a take of mine, or something. Sometimes I think out a little bit more. I don't say something because I do value the opinions of, my loved ones, my friends, my mutuals, people I am kind of in contact with on some degree. So that's kind of the only fear I'd say that really comes to it. I don't like to call myself courageous because that rage is easy, like you're talking about. And when you see so much injustice and just so much BS, I get mad. I just get so heated that whatever fear might have been there does disappear. Because rage feels powerful. For better or worse, you feel like you can do anything. And
Yeah.
so I try to channel it towards good ends because, it could lead to really bad ends, even if you have the best of intent. You don't handle things appropriately, you'll get everybody in trouble. So it really is more of I just get so angry and so heated at some of these just pervasive injustices that the fear does kind of disappear sometimes, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's why I speak. So
Yeah, I think we're living in very difficult times when there are people that are on, quote, the other side of the aisle for a myriad of reasons. A lot of people are on the other side just for like, hey, I don't want to pay taxes, and that's why I voted this way. And they really are, not informed necessarily about what's going on. And fake news is maybe the greatest marketing ploy of all times, because I can say so many things on so many topics in different platforms or in real life, and I am met with that's not true. And it is true. I mean, I just had someone yesterday on a video where I'm like, these amendments protect humans that have their feet on this soil, due process, etc. And that's what the video is about. It is me coming at with my full face saying due process is for humans on American soil. End of story, full stop. And they're still arguing with me that I'm wrong. And I'm like, dude, Google is free. It's on your phone. It's on whatever thing you just posted that comment. You could just say, who is, and it's the greatest marketing ploy of all time is the words fake news, because it will screw up any conversation, and you feel helpless. And that's where I think a lot of times this rage is coming from, is our feelings of helplessness. However, I so appreciate you punching me in the face, you challenging my comfort level, and everyone out there who has become comfortable in their belief system, their attachment to the ego that makes up who they are. I am a conservative. I voted this way. I am a good person. I am a liberal. I care about people. I'm for the good guys, and you come out through the screen and just kind of grab our throats and say, fuck you. No, you don't. Like, you're not caring. And that's what I love. I love someone that holds everyone, and I know after this conversation, including and especially your own, feet to the fire each and every day, and challenges, and be like, you just help spread disinformation. Like, what am I doing? And I think that people like you and I, albeit just this conversation and some videos on social media, we are stove touchers. We have to walk the walk. We have to believe it to our soul, to our bones, to our sinew. We have to know it to be able to just stand there and scream from the rafters. We can't sort of know it. We can't sort of put our fingers on it. I think that that's why I really wanted to create this podcast, is because there are so many stories behind the 7 seconds, the 1 minutes, the 3 minute clips that we see of our creators. They're real people with passions and whys, and I think a lot of them are stove touchers. I really do. I think a lot of them are stove touchers who've walked the walk. I think a lot of them have been silenced in their childhood and finally have a place to put these words. And I'm so glad that you're one of them.
I appreciate that. I do. I thank you. You've been very complimentary today, so I appreciate that. Um, I do want to kind of add to that because you kind of hit something really important there. I do think we kind of miss the differences in how we access people. Like you said, you can watch a 1 minute clip, but that's going to probably lack some level of nuance. It's one to many communication, which is very different than interpersonal, me and you having a chat. And I think people don't realize is like we're all offering a performance on these apps. The question isn't whether it's a performance because that's inherent. The question is it genuine, right? Is it a
Yeah.
genuine performance? Are we being true to our values, our beliefs? Are we really trying to push for what we believe? And the scary thing I think for people like you and I is once we really believe something, we go wholeheartedly because the process of getting to belief and then it's just a hard one, right? Because we don't want to attach ourselves to things we're not sure about. And
Yep.
so I think like even me, it's like struggling with things I feel conviction over. It's like, am I right? Because you never want to be like dogmatic. And I think you hit it, man. I think the way we can avoid that is by not attaching ourselves to these labels, right? I don't want to attach myself. And not that I think labels are useful for understanding perspective, but it's the values, foundational values are what's way more important and how that relates to our action than whatever label we attach ourselves to. Because a label doesn't make you a good person. Anyone
Yeah,
can
I mean,
slap
well,
a
think
label on
about it. Like,
themselves.
I was a card-carrying Republican. My grandfather was like head of the Republican Party in the state of Ohio. He was the House Whip. My dad was head of the Republican precinct in our town. I voted right down. And it's easy to attach your ego to something when you are born and raised that way, as we were speaking about in the beginning. But also it's changed. The Republican Party is not just like Republican. I love that conversation. I'm sure you've heard it a million times. Like back in the day, Republicans were Democrats and Democrats were Republicans, and it just switched. And I think people don't know that, which is you can tell a lot in 4 seconds about that conversation. But like my dad always said, my grandpa always said, they weren't talking about your uterus in the Republican Party of the 60s and 70s. Like that was not a thing. We didn't talk no one gave a shit what you were doing in your bedroom. And so these things have changed. And I think that even though our parents were Republicans, even though we were Republicans or even Democrats, I think we need to revisit what those words mean because they don't mean what they meant, at the beginning of the 1900s. They don't mean what they meant in the 50s. No, only thing Republican and Democrat used to be is money. That was it. No one gave a shit what you did in your bedroom. No one cared. And until, recently, now we talk about all these social issues, and that was not a thing. And so I think we all need to revisit and go, wait a minute, let me see exactly what I'm voting for and what these parties mean. And I think to your point, you don't want to label yourself a liberal. I think that's why a lot of people are going, okay, maybe I'm independent. Hold on, let me grab that. Like that sounds a little less, right? And so yeah, we're in a weird place. But humans want to find a drawer. They want to put each other in boxes so that they can understand everybody. It makes it make sense. But I think we're at the point now where we need to just question, not that we're at the point now, we've been there, but we need to question everything and we need to hold everybody's feet to the fire. Yours, mine, ask questions, whatever it is. And I think you do that beautifully. So are you mute the media everywhere?
Yeah, unless like the name's taken, but pretty much meet the media everywhere. The big
Okay.
places you can find me are TikTok and my Substack, which is in the bio there. So
Oh, the Substack too. And you're on Instagram too.
yeah, I'm on IG too. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's mute.the.media.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's attached to the TikTok. But yeah, Substack and TikTok are the best places to find me. So
Well, thank you so much for being here with me today.
absolutely, it's been a good convo. I appreciate you having me.
So good. So everyone, if you want to check out Mute the Media, he's all over Substack. My favorite place to find him is over on TikTok, but if you're only on Instagram, get him over there as well. And I will see all of you guys here next week. Matt, I will see you over in social media world. Thank you again for being here. Appreciate you.
Thanks for tuning in to the TikTok Famous Podcast with Meredith Willits. If you're loving the unfiltered stories and behind-the-scenes truths, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show. Until next time, let's get famous.